Joining me this week is an author, a television pundit, host of a nationally syndicated radio show, and now, most importantly, a returning guest in that very chair. Larry Elder, welcome back to the Rubin Report.
Dave, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, I am looking forward to this because I mentioned at the top of the show that I don't know that any guest that I've ever had on challenged me directly as much as you did and actually managed to change some of my feelings. That's got to feel pretty good for you.
Well, I had a lot of good feedback from the interview, and people complimented me, but I said the compliment should go to you because you were asking questions, and unlike a lot of interviewers, you really cared about the answer. You listened, then you responded. And so I think that's what made the interview so great.
So for you to sit down with a liberal, and I think last time we literally didn't know each other. I think maybe we had met for 10 seconds before you sat in the chair. You sit down with a liberal, and I think that you were ready to go. So when I said something about systemic racism, like you were ready to pounce, and you did. And my guy said to me after, we had only been doing the show for a few months, do you want to edit that part out? Because there's a part where you really kind of catch me in like a moment where I don't know. And we'll link to it right down below. I want people to see this. I think it's important. How hard is it for you to sit down with liberals, generally speaking, and have an honest conversation?
Depends on the liberal. If it's an open-minded liberal who really cares about what you have to say, it's pretty easy. If it isn't, if it's somebody who's already decided what they've decided and believe that liberals, that conservatives are mean people, rotten people, cold people, anti-science people, then we're going to be in for a bumpy night.
Right. Okay, so let's, I want to just recap a couple of the things we talked about last time for people that haven't seen it, and then we'll get to all the new stuff. So real quick, just tell me a little bit about your political evolution. How do you end up here as a conservative?
Well, it wasn't so much an evolution as it was kind of like a series of things that happened to me, people that I've met, books that I've read, and that all together you added up and I ended up being a conservative. My father was always a Republican. My mom, a Democrat, and so at the kitchen table, they would fight all the time about politics. And when I was younger, I sided with my mom, I think partially because it was just my mom. And when I got older, I began to side with my father, much to my mother's consternation.
So going back that, let's say, 50-ish years, roughly, what are the types of things that your dad was fighting for as a Republican at that time?
Well, I remember vividly during Watergate, my dad was defending Richard Nixon, which I thought was indefensible. I thought what Richard Nixon was accused of doing was suborning perjury and getting other people to lie was deeply wrong. My dad thought it was trivial. My dad felt that Richard Nixon had not done anything to enrich himself, that national security was not jeopardized, nobody died. Why would you impeach a president over the fact that he was trying to cover up a break-in to the Watergate? That was my dad's position. My mom's position, of course, was that Richard Nixon was a crook and a liar. Fast forward, the polls show that most Americans now believe that Richard Nixon should not have resigned over what he did and feel that what Hillary did was far worse and she did not have to resign.
Yeah, what does that say about just sort of where we've come and where we were, that we're so obsessed with scandal right now? I mean, we know right now, Trump's been in office for, as we're taping this, like 5 days or something, and it's like, there is just going to be massive scandal after massive scandal. Obama said just a couple weeks ago that he's very proud that his administration got through without a major scandal. Now that depends on what your definition of scandal, I suspect you disagree with that, but in terms of like a personal scandal or some real stealing of something or that kind of thing, But maybe you don't see it that way.
I do not see it that way. But your question was, what does it say about us? Where have we gone?
Yeah.
What it says about us is that when it's a Republican in office, somebody like Richard Nixon that people did not like, there's one level of scrutiny and one level of judgment. When it's a Democrat, somebody like Clinton or like Obama, there's a whole different thing. For Obama to say with a straight face that I've not had a major scandal, are you kidding me? What was Fast and Furious? What was Hillary's email server? What was denying the non-profit applications of conservatives with the IRS? You can have your doctor, you can keep your doctor, and Obama reiterated that line after it was obvious from the regs that you couldn't necessarily keep your doctor or you couldn't necessarily keep your plan. So
that line, didn't he basically say that the ends justify the means? That's sort of what he's saying. Like, I had to sell it, and we kind of knew. I'm not defending that particular line, but that was sort of his mea culpa.
I still think it's a scandal.
Yeah.
For you to say that you're going to bend the cost curve down, people are going to be no worse off, they're going to save money, and you don't save the money when you know full well that you can't keep your doctor if you want to keep your doctor, and to say it anyway, that to me, as far as I'm concerned, is a scandal.
Yeah.
Pulling out all the troops out of Iraq, over the advice of his entire national security team. Hillary wanted him to keep a stay-behind force. His Secretary of Defense wanted a stay-behind force. The CIA director wanted a stay-behind force. The Joint Chiefs wanted a stay-behind force. Our U.S. ambassador to Iraq advised Obama against pulling all the troops out. He did it anyway, and the media gave him a pass for that. And Ray Odierno, the retiring Army general of the Joint Chiefs, said that had the troops not been pulled out, ISIS could have been dealt with. That to me is a massive scandal for which Obama got a pass and still gets a pass.
So is that one of the situations where we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't? So that had he stayed, most people, and I'm guessing you included, probably didn't want us to be there forever. Having left the way he did, they were having democratic elections right before that. I mean, literally in the months before we left, they were having their first free democratic elections. And now it's an absolute disaster. So is that just one of those situations, there was no win in a way for him at the end? Because either we're going to occupy them forever or we're going to pull out and then some bad stuff's going to happen, which is exactly what happened.
Okay, now we're talking about kind of the merits of the Iraq War and whether or not we should have stayed or not stayed, and that's fine. Look, I believe that as long as the American public did not have the will to stick it through, because what George W. Bush said was, we'll leave when Iraq can stand up. As long as the American people did not have the will to do that, we shouldn't have gone. But I'm surprised, I think George W. Bush is surprised, I think Dick Cheney is surprised that over the advice of all the people that I just now mentioned, Obama pulled all the troops out anyway. He envisioned a stay-behind force to make sure that Iraq would be stable. I mean, we stayed in Germany, we stayed in Japan, we're still in South Korea. Yeah. It takes a while for Democrats.
I'm pretty sure we have 30,000 troops in Germany now or something like that.
Something like that. It takes a while for democracy to take root. And for us to bail out the way we did was incredibly irresponsible, and I thought jeopardized national security. And again, I am surprised that Obama felt confident enough to walk into the Oval Office and ignore the advice of all these people.
So would your argument be basically that these scandals, these issues that you brought up, basically he got a pass because the media is sort of in on it with the Democrats? Is that the basic idea?
Absolutely. For him to say, as he said many times during press conferences, I'm most proud of the fact that I rescued the U.S. economy. Really? The major things that were done, TARP and bailing out the auto companies, George W. Bush had set that into motion. His stimulus program, most economists don't believe it did anything. Obamacare was a brand new entitlement dropped on the back of job creators. And notice how he no longer bragged about things like cash for clunkers and cash for caulkers. He doesn't even, cash for clunkers rather, he didn't even talk about that anymore because they were boondoggles. They did not work. They cost the American people, American taxpayers money.
Okay, so I know that a certain amount of people are going to hear what you said there and go, that doesn't make any sense. And then the other, this is going to be a very 50-50 split on sort of where people are at before this. So let's move to some of the philosophical stuff, which I think is where we can get into the real meat of this.
All right.
So racism, this is the issue that more people contacted me about when I was discussing you than anything else. And it's where you challenged me the most on systemic racism. So first off, does any racism exist in America? Not systemic racism, we'll get to that in a sec, but what racism is real right now?
We live in a country that's got 330 million people. Roughly 8 to 10% of them believe Elvis is still alive. Almost half of them believe if you send Elvis a letter, he'll get it. Obviously, there's racism. There are individuals who don't like other people because of their race. No question about it. But are there corporations that have a policy of not hiring anybody? Are there governmental agencies that have a policy of not hiring anybody? The answer is no. If you can tell me the company, IBM, Apple, that has a policy of not hiring black people, tell me, or brown people, tell me who that company is, and we can deal with it. I don't know what people mean when they talk about institutional racism. If this were the 50s, I would know what you're talking about. When there was segregation that was legal segregation in the South, where you couldn't marry somebody outside your race in certain states. But that is no longer the case right now. The racism that people talk about right now, in my opinion, is individual stuff, where some individual doesn't like you, or some individuals don't like you. But is it something that is anything akin to what we experienced in the 50s and the 60s? Absolutely not. And I think it's insulting to people who have fought hard and died in the 50s and the 60s to get us to this point, to act like things are just the same. Yeah. When you have people like Eric Holder saying, as he did when he was AG, we now have pernicious racism, which he said was every bit as bad as the old racism. What the hell are you talking about? I mean, it's insulting to me.
So what do you do to defeat that idea? So again, this is, you mentioned that in our conversation, and it really did, you got me. I said something, well, there's systemic racism. And you said, well, what companies can I
I just asked you for an example.
Yeah, you
didn't
got
have
me.
one.
And so I do agree with you. There are racist people. There are a certain amount of people that don't like black people, that don't like Jews, that don't like gays, etc. We live in a free country. You're allowed to not like people.
That's
It may
right.
be odious and unpleasant, but you're allowed to. You can't harm them, but...
Correct.
But what do you do to stop the idea of what you're talking about, that things have changed for the better and that there's a certain amount of people that want that oppression, that want the oppression because it sort of puts them above other people? How do you fight that? You've been trying to fight it, I think, for a long time.
Tell the truth. That's how you fight it. Tell the truth. I mean, this movement called Black Lives Matter, I think we talked about that a little bit. It's as bogus and as phony a movement as the notion that O.J. Simpson is innocent from having killed 2 people. It's a fraud. Most cops simply want to do a good job and come home. Most cops, frankly, are more hesitant to pull the trigger against a black suspect than a white suspect. There have been a couple of studies that have shown that recently. One of them was an economist from Harvard named Roland Fryer, and he is apparently the youngest tenured professor in the history of Harvard, and he's a tenured professor in the Department of Economics. And he did a study to find out about police brutality. He assumed he would find the opposite. And he was shocked, he said, when he found out that most police officers are more reluctant to use deadly force on a black suspect than a non-black suspect. And the reason, in my opinion, is pretty obvious. If you shoot a black person and there's any question whatsoever about it, you're going to be under the gun. You're going to be possibly prosecuted, maybe lose your pension, maybe go to jail. Cops are deathly afraid of being perceived as engaging in racial profiling. There was a recent poll that just came out, and it turns out 75% of cops said that they are more reluctant now to engage with citizens than before the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah. So what's the disconnect then? When you see these cities, when you see Atlanta and you see Chicago and you see Ferguson and all of these places that are usually under Democratic control, they usually have Democratic mayors.
Right.
The groupthink would tell you, wait a minute, Democrats are helping black people. So where is the disconnect coming from?
A lot of people are not thinking critically, Dave. They're just not. Take Baltimore. Baltimore was run by a black mayor. She got 85% of the vote. What kind of politician gets 85% of the vote?
Yeah, I think Gaddafi got 85%.
I think Stalin got 105%.
Yeah.
And the top 2 officials running the police department were black. The command staff, majority black. All the city council Democrat, majority black. The state attorney, the one who brought the charges against the 6 officers, is a black female. And yet and still, they're still talking about systemic racism. The fact of the matter is a lot of black suspects are engaging in bad conduct, and the police are doing their job. And often the bad conduct is against another black victim.
Yeah. Does this all come down to education for you? Because at the end of the day, if you can teach people properly about history, and if you can teach them properly about what the role of government is and all of those things, that's really how you untie this stuff from just the screeching people on both sides.
I think so, but it's also all about rationally connecting the dots. Is it really true that that a young black man is more likely to be pulled over by a cop than a young white man? And if it is true, another question is why? And you cannot have a meaningful discussion about any of this without talking about behavior. I think maybe the last time we were here, we talked about a National Institutes of Justice study. That's the research arm of the DOJ. They did a study that came out in 2013 called Traffic Stops and Race. And it turns out that whether you're talking about driving without a license or driving while drunk or driving with a busted tailpipe or driving without a seatbelt or driving without a car seat in the back, it turns out black motorists were more likely to commit those crimes than a white motorist. And the study said that the differences in stopping have to do with differences in offending. If you can't have a meaningful discussion unless you have a meaningful discussion about behavior.
Right. Now, I suspect that some people on the left would hear that and they'd say, well, black people have been oppressed economically, so they are more likely to have a taillight out or some other thing. You would just say that's nonsense. You would just say that's individual responsibility. You got to drive a car that's supposed to be the one that's on the road.
Well, that's right. Also, there's more poor white people in the country than there are poor black people, but it's black people that complain about being disproportionately pulled over.
Yeah.
Half of all the homicides in this country involve black victims. Almost all of the black victims were killed by other black people. I don't know what that has to do with cops being racist. It has to do with the fact that a disproportionately large percentage of crime is committed by a small percentage of people, usually males, usually young black males, often against their peers. And that is because of the lack of fathers in the home. I didn't say it, Obama said it. A kid raised without a father is 5 times more likely to be poor, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in jail. The number one problem facing this country is not bad cops, not Obamacare. It is the large number of children raised without fathers. That is a product of the welfare state. Between 1890 and 1920, 1930, believe it or not, a black kid was slightly more likely to be born to mothers and fathers married to each other than a white kid.
So what's the connection there? What's the 1920 connection? So the welfare state starts, and why does that harm the black family more?
The welfare state really got kicked off in the mid-'60s. 25% of black kids were born outside of wedlock in 1960.
Yeah.
Right now it's 73%. And what happened is literally Lyndon Johnson launched a so-called war on poverty, and he sent workers literally knocking on people's doors to apprise women of their right to welfare provided there was no man in the house. And so what we've done is change the culture. We've incentivized women to marry the government. We've allowed men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. It is a neutron bomb dropped on this country, all because of the war on poverty that was done by Lyndon Johnson and the Democrats, and with tacit support by Republicans as well.
Do you think the intentions were
one
good?
quick thing, and
Yeah.
we know that there is a negative incentive because in 1996, when Bill Clinton signed the Welfare Reform Act of 1996, welfare declined by over 50%. Far steeper than anybody predicted. It turned out there was a bunch of able-bodied people and able-minded people sitting on couches, and when the jig was up, they got off the couch and got to work.
Yeah. Do you think the intentions are good? So when Lyndon Johnson pushes this, when the Democrats sign it, and the Republicans who got on board, were their intentions we're going to help people get out of poverty, or is there really something more nefarious going on?
No, the intentions were quite good. FDR talked about the corrosive effect of government dependency when he launched the New Deal, and Lyndon Johnson talked about getting people off of government dependencies and making them more self-sufficient by launching the war on poverty. Those were their stated goals, and I believe them. But human nature is such that if you allow somebody an easy out, some people will take an easy out. And that's what we've done with a lot of people.
So basically we've said to a certain subset of people, and it I guess is a disproportionately amount of black people, we've said you can get a certain amount of government handouts. And basically your argument is that this is now just leaving people in the status quo. Because if you can get something, subsidized housing, whatever it is,
Right.
food stamps, and you don't have to do anything, you'll just take it. That's not a black characteristic, that's a characteristic of what any human might
Of
be.
human nature. And there was a poll taken in 1986 by the LA Times. They asked poor people and non-poor people a bunch of questions. And one of them was, do you believe that poor people have additional children to get additional money from welfare? The majority of non-poor people said no. They probably thought that was insulting, if not racist. 64% of poor people said yes. Also, they were asked this question, poor people were, do you believe that welfare is a crutch, creates dependency, or do you believe it's a means to get you to stand on your own 2 feet and go forward? More of them said it was a crutch that created dependency than it was a means to get you on your own 2 feet and go forward. These are poor people responding to this poll.
Yeah. So basically, guilt has a lot to do with this. The guilt, sort of white liberal guilt, in a way, has actually subjected black people to not all black people, of course, but a certain subset of poorer black people to a set of circumstances that they almost can't get out of.
I think that's part of it, but also I think part of it is people that are comfortable and wealthy and well-educated look around to figure out how they can perfect the world. And they forget that part of getting anywhere is overcoming obstacles and struggling. And if you make things real comfortable for people, some people are going to take the easy way out. So I think it's a kind of mindset, the kind of mentality.
Yeah, when did we get to that point where fighting for what's yours, fighting that no one should give you anything, that the government isn't supposed to give you anything, and no one should, that it is your life to live, it's your job as a human to pursue what makes you happy and take what you can. That doesn't mean destroying everything around you,
right.
but finding what makes you happy. When did that get crossed up? Is it all connected to this, do you think?
That's a good question. I think the Founding Fathers intended for us to have what people have characterized as rugged individualism. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution set forth a handful of things that the federal government should do. They did not include Social Security, they did not include Medicare, they did not include Medicaid, they did not include charity. But we've gotten away from that. I think because as people become more and more affluent, they look around and try to perfect the world.
Yeah. Would you roll back all of those things?
I would.
know, do you consider yourself a libertarian?
I do.
You're basically a libertarian,
Yes.
right? So you would,
small L libertarian.
Small
I'm a
L.
law and order libertarian.
so you think there should be driver's licenses?
Of course.
Yeah, so you're not like, well, because it's an important distinction to make, because there are plenty of libertarians that don't. So what makes you not a classical liberal then? Because this has become one of the themes over the last year.
I am a classical liberal in the John Stuart Mill sense of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely I am. Somebody who believes in maximum personal freedom, but also you have to believe in maximum personal responsibility. And that is to deal with the consequences of your choices.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't want to do that. They want to shield people from the vestiges of the world, of life. And when you do that, you also will create some other kind of reaction that'll be worse. My father used to say, when you try and get something for nothing, you often end up getting nothing for something.
Yeah. So what sort of social safety net should there be then? Or do you not think that there should be? And this may be the difference between a small L libertarian and a classical liberal.
I think most classical liberals would feel the way I feel, and that is that the safety net should be provided by other individuals, not by government, but by churches, nonprofits. One of the things that Alexis de Tocqueville wrote about in Democracy in America were all of these what were called mutual aid societies that were set up. This is before Social Security, before Medicare, before Medicaid, and believe it or not, a black person living in Chicago in the 1920s and 1930s was more likely to have health care insurance than a white person because he joined these mutual aid societies that provided that.